welcome to our Mentor Me panel. Today we have with us Aditi.
Hi everyone. My name is Aditi. I'm from the class of 2016. Seems like forever ago. I went to University College London, UCL, in London, and I did my degree in social sciences. I graduated as BSc Social Sciences. It was a new degree at UCL. So when I was stepping into it, I basically felt like a guinea pig because I was the first, I was part of the first cohort. The three main pillars of my degree were sociology, psychology, and social science research. When I kind of got into the degree, one of the main things in my mind was just that I wanted to study people and communities and different types of societies. And one of my main motivators, I guess, to go to UCL was that I wanted to study in London because that was my dream since I was a little girl. And also because the degree pretty much matched my priorities in terms of, having a healthy balance of sociology and psychology. Because I don't know if a lot of people had this preconceived notion as I did, but I genuinely thought that psychology would be a very heavy subject for me to get into directly. My degree was very interdisciplinary. And of course, in the UK, you pretty much have to stick to what you have once you get in, because it's 3 years and bam, you're out. So there was not much of, changing your major or anything like that. But I had a lot of freedom when it came to kind of, choosing different modules and courses. And I had the privilege of doing my degree under a faculty called the Institute of Education, which became part of UCL in 2014, which is currently the best in the world for education, which was actually what inspired my passion for education. Sometime around second year, I obviously had a lot of exposure to academics, lots of little kids coming in for research projects that the IOE, the Institute of Education, was doing. So I found myself slowly gravitating towards the social policy aspect of education. And by the time I graduated, I did my thesis on the Indian education policy and how it has evolved since 1968. And this year we have a new education policy that's come out. So that's thrilling news for me. That's where I kind of ended my degree. And I was very keen to kind of get into the workspace and actually understand how education and policy are actually on ground, because what you study is very different to the actual reality. And one of the main things that I wanted to do was to come back to India, because a lot of people, ask me that why aren't you staying in the UK? Why aren't you doing a master's or maybe going for teach first? Because that's one of the first things people think about when you think education and primary education. But I wanted to come back to India because somehow the patriot in me and the love for India just kind of brought me back here. And in fact, I went back to work at one of the organizations that I interned with when I was 15, and so that's called United Way Mumbai. So it's a non-profit organization. They're essentially sort of an aggregator between non-governmental organizations across India and corporates. The main chunk of work that United Way Mumbai does is design CSR programs and essentially connect corporates to very specialized NGOs who work in very niche areas that maybe a large organization might not have enough reach into. And United Way Mumbai is part of a global movement. So there are 1,800 United Ways across the world. And United Way is very big in the US. You might have even heard of it. And it originated there. When I stepped in, I felt a real sense of purpose, feeling that, I was part of a global movement. And also there was this additional part that I was going back to the city where I was born. So I was born in Mumbai. So there were a lot of things that brought me back to Mumbai and then working in this organization. So one was, of course, the fact that it brings, the communities and corporates together. But another very important aspect was that United Way Mumbai works across different sectors in the development sector, within the development sector. So obviously, when I kind of speak about my passion for education and all of that in the context of my degree, I was very much keen to get into the charity sector because that is where a lot of valuable research is happening at the moment in our country. That's slowly changing as we see the education policy evolving and the government kind of rearranging their budgets, not probably not in the best way possible, but moving in the right direction. It really meant a lot to become part of an implementation oriented body rather than a think tank would be more oriented towards research. So I was working on projects in health, I was working on projects in education, health education, environment, social inclusion. So people with disabilities, different marginalized communities like fishermen, garment workers, etc., etc. And then, so that's essentially where I work. And of course, my work, so I was just mentioning earlier that I've been crazy busy because COVID has, it's actually pushed us to become even more innovative in the way we interact with communities because it's very difficult to interact with someone like I am with you right now because I'm on video. So it's easier because we have that back and forth. But with COVID, there are so many different things that, different barriers that come up. Like not everybody has a phone, not everybody has any sort of connectivity, forget about internet. So it was definitely a major learning experience. But again, none of our programs sort of stopped. So yeah, I've just completed a year at United Way Mumbai, and that's what I've been doing. I've had a good mix of work from home and working out of the office. So the benefit of working at a non-governmental organization, which is part of a global movement, is that we essentially function like a corporate because we are accountable to a larger board of directors. So I think we have an office, we have a proper desk, we have very specific processes and mechanisms. So in terms of structure, it's very similar to maybe a corporate setup, but of course the work we do is it's very different. We still have client meetings and we have the calls that keep going on and we have paperwork. But so I'll kind of break it into two. So the first 6 months when I was in office, I worked mainly within, so I work in corporate partnerships, which is essentially bringing different corporate donors into the organization and kind of designing programs for them. And I specifically work on workplace campaigns, so which means employee volunteering. So a lot of corporates not only like to give in their CSR funds, so the 2% that they would like to contribute, but also get their employees engaged through volunteering events or any sort of activity. So in the first 6 months, I would say a typical day would probably go into organizing a lot of events. So that would mean talking to different stakeholders. So that would be coordinating with the corporate client, asking them that, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to do something education based? So do you want to like arrange for a session in a government school? Or do you want to do like a cleanup on the beach? And then probably speak to vendors. So vendors would mean like any sort of vendor, literally. So it would be for stationery, or it would be for something as basic as gunny bags, which you need for a cleaning up activity. And then last but definitely the most important is our community partners. So community partners could be other NGOs, it could be schools, it could be other research organizations, or a lot of, we work with Rotary Club of Mumbai as well. So the way we reach out to communities is via these NGOs in most cases, especially when it's outside Mumbai, because even though it's called United Way Mumbai, we work pan-India. Of course, when they're like very specific locations, like if you come to Mumbai, there's like this very tiny area in Dharavi, for example, that you're thinking of, and you really don't have any personal connect with somebody there, we would reach out to an NGO partner. So over the 6 months, my day was basically split into these 3 different types of conversations and different documentation of these conversations. So a lot of emails, a lot of calls, a lot of reading as well, because you have to really work on building a rapport with partners, whether it's a corporate partner or an NGO partner. Of course, it's easier for an NGO partner because there's a lot of empathy, because you're doing similar work, you're doing it for a good cause, because I think motive is really important in the sector. So for me, my motive is to for the benefit of the community. But when I'm talking to a corporate client, and I feel like I've been facing this challenge consistently over the past 12 months, where the corporate is more focused on numbers, impact numbers. And of course, that's where philanthropy and CSR become a little bit of a dodgy subject. But what has to be done has to be done. So of course, there's a lot of focus when you talk to corporates about numbers and, you know, nitty gritty of budgets maybe. So a lot of my work is also budgeting, because it's all implementation, essentially what I do. So that was my first 6 months, and every day would be juggling across these 3 different conversations. And I would say maybe once or twice in every 15 days, I would have some sort of activity. So I would have a cleanup activity, I would have, or maybe an awareness session. So it was a lot of engagement and, you know, building connections with the community. So that way is I kind of, you know, just hit the ground running when I started the job, because I just had to kind of go make a connect with people, and that's where my job started. And I think it was really easy because we're all people at the end of the day. So yeah, so those were the first 6 months. And then so we had volunteering sessions and regularly. And in fact, just before March, we kind of so COVID hit India, and everybody was panicking, and CSR programs were going on hold. And in fact, I had a very large account that I had just taken over, and we had a massive grant that we had to deploy before the financial year ended. And we were all panicking. So we had, of course, so I think the last 2-3 weeks of Feb, we had a lot of activities, because we knew that it would get challenging to have large groups of people together. So within my team, one of the flagship campaigns that I've been part of is wash awareness, so hand washing. And we were doing wash kit distributions and wash awareness sessions. And this grant specifically was, it had minimal employee volunteering, and I was the only one there. So I had to engage about 600 to 700 children with 2 of my team members in wash sessions over a period of 2 days. So that meant having 70 kids from a government school in one room, and one massive room, without any mic or anything. And it was a brilliant experience, but I almost lost my voice at the end of it. But that's what I think that was one of the most exciting aspects of the job, when you go meet the kids and they tell you these really cute stories, and that's when you realize that you know who you're trying to help. So that was the first 6 months, and COVID hit us, and honestly, NGOs have been struggling to find purpose and meaning at this time, because there are a lot of niche areas which NGOs work in. And I think funding towards programs just completely stopped when COVID hit, because there were very basic things that needed to be supported, like hunger and healthcare. And then people were really not thinking about educating women, or empowering youth, or continuing to skill youth while they were away from school. And of course, the sector suffered a lot, and we had partners who were struggling to get back on their feet. Even now, they're struggling to get back on their feet. And I think these 6 months, ironically, have been the busiest for us, because the good thing is that we've been completely involved in the healthcare and the education aspect of it. So there's a lot of awareness generation that's been going on, and all the government hospitals in Mumbai, we're connected with them. We have a personal connect with them. So we've been providing them healthcare equipment. On the other hand, we're also doing large-scale ration kit distributions. So, we're hitting those 2 main points, which is why work has been crazy busy, because you're trying to mobilize like hundreds and thousands, so like lakhs of kits in one day, just to get people the food that they need. And this is when you realize, you take a lot of things for granted. And again, as I said, it really brings you back to the point where you realize your purpose, which is to help the end beneficiary. Nothing else really matters. So the past 6 months have just been kind of me just at a desk, video calls, phone calls, documentation, a lot of legal paperwork, because you have to sign agreements with corporates and NGOs, because that's how it goes. That's how implementation goes. None of our team members have actually been on ground. We have a lot of we have vendors who are doing our work for us. So again, there's been a major shift from having NGO partners or people who do similar jobs to us doing the work, versus getting vendors who really have nothing to do with what you are actually doing, but then you're making them ambassadors for your organization because it's the safest way possible. But nonetheless, even though I've been stuck behind a desk, I think it's definitely been it's been an amazing learning experience, because I think you learn to become more efficient. Like at the office, you have even if you have to process a grant to an NGO, you have to make a payment. There's so much paperwork involved, and then all of a sudden, paperwork's gone. Everything is Google Forms, emails, everything. So I think we've also learned to become more efficient, and I think so. Yeah, that's basically two ways I can kind of club my entire experience into at the moment. UCL as an experience was, I still feel, even though I did a lot of stuff, I met a lot of people, very different people. I still feel like I didn't get as much as I could have, because there was just so much to explore. Like I was part of a basketball team. I also attended a couple of society events. I wasn't particularly inclined to join a specific society except for the basketball society, because I don't know if a lot of people know, but a lot of my batchmates know that I was crazy about basketball. So that was the only thing I could manage to kind of stay consistently in touch with, besides academics. One of the major benefits, I guess, of being at UCL and being in London was just the diversity of perspective, because I had friends from all across the world. Even if they were from the UK, they were from like Scotland or from Cornwall or from south of England. So they all had very different political views and views on very specific issues as well. And I think meeting a lot of different people really puts your own ideas about certain issues into perspective. And I mean, there's no specific way I can say that this is the point where I realized that these people helped me find my purpose, because I don't think a lot of people have the privilege to ever experience that realization. But that was one thing, meeting a lot of people. And I think the second was just being on my own. So I lived in a hall where I was with 500 people in the first year of uni, and then in the second year I moved out with one of my friends. She was also Indian, and we kind of just had to make a life for ourselves those 2 years and on our own. And then so that for me that meant getting a job and like balancing a lot of different things together. I did an internship at the National Autistic Society. So I think so that was a charity as well. So that was working with people on the spectrum, and the job was it had similar components of what I do at the moment. So I was part of the fundraising campaigns team. So it was a lot of campaigning, right? So I think when it comes to working in a charity, I think that experience over there kind of gave me a little bit of an insight into what it would feel like just working in a charity, whether it would be in the UK or back in India. So that sort of got me warming up to the idea of working in a charity, even post, after leaving my degree. And then when it comes to the courses that I did, as I mentioned earlier before, because I was in the Institute of Education, there were a lot of different courses like politics and policy in education, economics of education, economics of public policy. So there's so much intersection. You can just pick up whatever you like, and then you can also talk about the radicalization of feminism in the context of education. And it's just like it's very interesting topics that you must have thought of, but you don't really think of actually studying them at an academic level. Then you think about creativity and education and how important creativity actually is in education. But again, why would you do a course in that? Like it doesn't really strike you until you pick it up. So I think the turning point for me was when I was in the last semester of my second year. I picked up politics and policy in education. And a lot of my studying was focused on British education policy, on the and I read about the national curriculum and all of that. So that was the turning point for me, and I realized that okay, I need to know more about my country, because if somebody asks me, where are you from, Aditi, I need to be like, okay, I'm from India. And if they ask me that, oh, how is education in India, I need to be able to give them an informed view of what I think education is. Barring the entire patriotic bit of it, it's just about having that information and being up to date. And it started with just being up to date, but then I kind of kept reading. I read a lot of critiques of the national policy in education, and then it just stuck after that, everything. And it sounds strange, but it was like providence. Like I spoke to people, I just randomly found papers. I literally found a book in the library which was like lying discarded next to the printer, which was on the evolution of education policy in the globe in the 20th century. Like what? Like why would that book just show up 2 days after I've picked up a module in education? So I would say a lot of it was also providence. A lot of my choices after I chose that module, which was politics and policy in education, kind of brought me to where I was exactly a year ago, where I was like, okay, I want to work towards improving the Indian education system, because at that point I knew that the Indian education had a lot of flaws in it. I mean, we went to an international school, so I think that speaks a lot to our education system that, I'm not criticizing the IB at all, because I am who I am today because I did the IB. But at the same time, we should be able to also have that same quality of education for the rest of the people in our country who don't have the same, access to resources as we do. I realize that, yes, that's my long-term goal, but it all just, it sounds very, I would say it sounds too specific for somebody who's just finished a bachelor's degree. So I had to kind of take a step back, right? So which brings me to the second part of your question, which was that why did you come back to India, and why not, pursue a career there and take it forward from there? So of course, the first aspect is that I knew more about India, so that was the reason why I wanted to come back. The second was that the charity sector in the UK is very different to that of India. So while it gave me a nice taste of what it would be like, I knew that I would still be in a position of privilege, even when I'm working for the less privileged in the UK, because it's just that the standards are different. You can't change that. It's a lot of history, but that's what it is. So I would say that the entire effort towards understanding the Indian education policy more is what brought me back to India. And I'm very confidently saying, and this will not change, that I am here to stay. And there might be a point where I would be like, okay, maybe I want to take a sabbatical and I want to go do a master's, or maybe go do some sort of apprenticeship in an organization outside India, which specifically, will give me the skills that maybe I won't be able to get here. But I don't see myself pursuing a career anywhere outside, because now I know I have a finite long-term goal. And of course, that will keep shifting with time, because changing an education system, or even understanding it for that matter, takes a very long period of time. If you have the goal to go study in the UK, I'm pretty sure it's going to hit you sometime around you start IB1, so sometime around you start 11th grade. So I'll give you a little bit of what my experience was like, because when I stepped into, so I joined TISB when I was in 11th grade. I was in another international school around Mumbai, and I taken all three sciences. I taken only 8 subjects, yeah, and TISB pushes everyone to take 10 or 11, and I was intimidated by that already. So I really wanted to make up for that when I was stepping into TISB. And I had that goal in mind that, I prefer the UK over the US because I don't want to study for that long. And the second is that, as I told you, it was my dream to study in London. When I walked in, so when we had orientation in our first week, and I had my first meeting with Miss Prabha, I remember I walked in and I was like, I'm going to take math HL, I'm going to take bio, and no, I'm going to take math, econ, and English HL or something, right? And she was just like, okay, hold on, dial back a little bit. Do you have any idea what you want to do? Like, what you might want to pursue, after you finish the IB? Like, is it bio that you want to pursue, or do you want to do econ, or do you want to do English literature, which will make English completely compulsory for you to kind of, study? And I knew that at that point, I knew that I was very curious about, studying the mind, studying the communities that we lived in, studying how different people interacted with each other, why do they interact with each other. The entire idea of compassion and empathy were very interesting to me, and I really wanted to study that. I know it sounds very evolved. I'm only being able to articulate this now. Back then, I was like, oh, I want to study something about people. That's what I said. Okay, I want to study people. So she was like, okay, so take history. And I was like, okay. I'd never done history before. I'd taken 3 sciences in econ in 9th and 10th in IGCSE. And I was like, history, I've never done history. I mean, I haven't done history for 2 years, so I don't know how that's going to work out. She was like, take econ, take history, take English if you want to. You really don't have to take math HL. So math HL was because my parents were forcing me, because they thought I was good in maths. So my parents were like, okay, history, really? So Indian parents, very conservative. Both of them are engineers. So studying history, why? Why you want to study history, Aditi? But Miss Prabha, being Miss Prabha, she was brilliant, and she was like, just take my word for it. If you want to study people, try history out and see how it works for you. I took history SL, and believe it or not, 2 months later, I switched to HL because I enjoyed it so much. So I think from that experience, I realized that you have to have even a vague idea of what you want to do. Stepping into 11th grade really helps you figure out what you might want to study at college. It doesn't work for everyone. And as I said, my degree was interdisciplinary. So that was also an anomaly for doing a degree in the UK, because as you said, in the UK, once you have a degree, you just have to go at it. Otherwise you drop out and you start again. Specifically within the social sciences, if you really have an interest in the social sciences, it will show up in your subject choices. It will show up in your interests when you're writing your TOK essay, or when you're writing your extended essay, or when you're even talking to people, the observations you make. I think you have to pay a lot of attention to how you look at the world also, because unless and until you have like a very haphazard combination of subjects that you're taking up, like if you're going to take like bio and business management and like math and art maybe, so that sort of subject choice will again lead you to something very interdisciplinary as well, because you're kind of dipping your toes into a lot of different things, and nobody's going to look down upon you for that, because it just shows that you're good at a lot of things, and you were an interdisciplinarian, which is not a bad thing, because we're stepping into a world where we're realizing more and more that everything is related to one another. So interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary is not a bad thing. But for the UK, I do acknowledge that this entire formula might not fit a lot of people, but most of the people I know from TISB who went to the UK, a few went and they did medicine. a few went and they did business and econ. So again, you see business and econ. Medicine is pretty finite in itself. I did social sciences. One of my batchmates, he took physics, chem, and history, and then he was like, okay, I'm gonna go do. I think he did earth sciences or something like that. So I think what you study will tie into your degree, and I think when you're looking through, so ideally, if you're interested in a subject area, and if you want to go to the UK, you have to be proactive. So by saying proactive, you have to kind of do a little bit of research. So for me, I knew that I wanted to do something which was not specifically one subject. So I would probably have gone for something like a PPE, so a philosophy, politics, or economics, or sociology and psychology, or social sciences, like I did. So you still have a lot of options. Like in the UK, you do have degrees where you can actually you have 3 different streams, and there is a slight misconception about the UK being very how they're very focused on your grades and how they're very focused on your personal statement on the UCAS, and how they're very wary of the subjects you take and the fact that is it matching the degree you're applying for or not. But in reality, it really isn't like that. I think every person's application, every person's experience is what makes them stand out or makes them, valuable enough for a university. So your recommendations, your, whatever essays you write during your 2 years doing the IB, that play into your application. So I think when you're fixated on the idea of going to the UK, one main thing that I would advise is just to be proactive about, you don't have to specifically know that, okay, I'm going to do only history, I'm going to do only philosophy, because you have that flexibility. In the UK, you do get the flexibility. I know friends who switched from social sciences to philosophy, politics, economics. So it happens both ways. You can switch. You have to have a good rationale. It needs to match. You can't go from accounting to social sciences. Like, you're going to have to drop a year. Like, it doesn't make sense. But they're not as fixated on, you going through with the degree no matter what. And a lot of my friends doing computer science, doing geography, or doing urban design, they all, they all had the option of picking up an elective from another school. So picking up an elective from King's or from Imperial, if applicable, just to get a taste of how the course is at another university. So you do have that option, and I think, and I'm sure a lot of people who do study in the UK and might want to add on to this at some point. But there are a lot of myths that need to be debunked while applying to the UK, because they are definitely becoming more flexible when it comes to your applications, because it comes through. Because I applied with a predicted score of 36, which is not great. I did better. I got a 38. But I applied with a 36 to Durham University, and the requirement was 39, but I got a conditional offer. And, when I spoke to them, so I spoke to them about the degree and all of that when I was, weighing in my options, and I had to firm one of the unis, right, before I declined the others. So I spoke to them, and they told me that it's not only your grades or your UCAS application that made us choose you, but it's also the different recommendations that come through. And when your recommendations come through, I'm not talking about, your teachers being like, oh my God, this kid is amazing. He or she studies so much. It's about, are you passionate? Are you thinking? Are you questioning things? Because to be a good student, you need to be able to question. It's as simple as that, because that's what learning is about. So again, it's being proactive and constantly, questioning the different options you have in front of you. It's the main way you can kind of crack getting into a good uni that you will enjoy going to. I think work ethic is one of the biggest things, but I'll say that it didn't really, I won't say work ethic for me, because I was at TSB for only 2 years. And I think work ethic is something that, it comes through over time. And I genuinely didn't think that I had built my work ethic at that point. I think it came through when I started working a job in the UK. Don't get me wrong, I think TISB really, honed it in. You need to have a good work ethic. And that's how I got to such an amazing uni. But being at TISB and also doing the IB at TISB, one key skill or maybe, value that has stayed with me is openness to feedback. Doing the IB, it's a constant, like when you do your internal assessments or you do your FOAs or IOCs or whatever you do, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of feedback. And one very important thing, which I learned from my batch, and maybe I don't know if a lot of people experience this as well, but this is not just while you're studying, but it's also during the college application process. You run your work or your essays through your peers. And, I think openness to feedback is very important. And I think when we were encouraged to do that, when we were encouraged to kind of share our essays with our peers or our friends, because it's a difference, yeah? Sharing your essay with your friend and your peers, because it's just a different experience, because your friends might, they might either go too hard on you or they might not go too hard on you. Peers might have a completely different perspective, because your friends are slightly aligned to the way you think. And I think that's when I went to TISB, it was encouraged constantly, whether it was me in bio class or whether it was me in econ class, where I would be confused and I'd be like, okay, I've done this, I figured this out, but I need to speak to someone else. And I think it's a lot easier when you're younger being open to feedback, because you're in a school, you feel like you have a lot to learn. But I think when I stepped into the IB, there's a lot about being a self-starter and being open, being a self-starter, being a very having initiative. And I think that makes you feel very independent, and it makes you feel that you don't need anybody else. And TISB really pushed that through, that feedback will always be important. And no matter who it comes from, honestly, because the way you put your work into an essay could have the same feedback as the way you perform on the basketball court. I kid you not, it's the same thing. Like for me, I had a lot of experiences where now I look back and I've received the same feedback I have in English class from Miss Shampa, which I've also heard from my basketball coach. And I was like, oh my God, interesting. Didn't expect this to happen. So openness to feedback, also different people have different perspectives. So yes, openness to feedback, definitely. The nature of the work I do, as I said, it was a personal choice to get into this job and getting into the sector. And it was driven by the realization that I have this purpose to work in the community, learn from the community, understand the community, so that I can grow to become a person who can help develop the education system in India. So I think when you step into the charity or the NGO sector, there is a major, this is a major issue that has been being covered recently, which is called compassion fatigue. People in this sector tend to give so much, and I'm talking about people who work in the development sector for people. They tend to give so much that they just don't have anything left for themselves. And honestly, all of my coworkers have experienced this. They continue to experience this. And one major, I think it is a threat, and I will term it as a threat. One major threat of working in the development sector is that, you have this, that your work matters a lot, and you derive a lot of meaning in your own life from this work. I can't stress on it enough, but your work is not everything. Your work is not your entire life. And I think it's something that, I've learned from my parents. I've literally read in books. I have watched movies. And I can understand what that means now, because especially in the last 6 months, I've been working on COVID programs. And, there's just, forget about the time, but the amount of emotional investment that a job like this needs. It's, you can't put a number on it. It's indefinite, because every day it keeps growing. Like yesterday, I was just kind of, making a list of all the different organizations I had worked with at this point, so that I could kind of, go back to them and figure out what's going on with them. And in the past 12 months, I've spoken to 52 organizations, and I've worked with 52 organizations, which means I have given something to these 52 organizations. And when I say I've given something, I'm not saying I've given them money or whatever. That doesn't matter. I've built a rapport with them. I have tried to understand what's going on with them personally and also within their own sphere. So I think there's a lot, of course, about bandwidth and all of that. But I think trying to, be compassionate, understand different people's struggles, it can be very exhausting. And this is the job. It is the job. In this sector, it is the job. And I think I won't lie, it has affected my mental health, and I have experienced, dips in morale when I have felt like, oh my God, like I just can't get this out of my head. Like I'm just always constantly worrying, and I'm always thinking that, oh my God. And then you also go through this, I have the privilege to live with my parents. I have my own room. And then I just think about that, oh my God, I serve communities where there are like 8-9 people living in one room. And then I'm just having like a quarter life crisis. And all of this happening in like the span of like 5 minutes. And then 5 minutes, my coffee breaks over, and then I have to hit work again. A thread of this job is compassion fatigue. And I think that does affect your mental health a lot. So it's very important to not derive meaning from the job itself. And I think it's important to understand that while the work you do is meaningful, the burden of the entire world is not on your shoulders. There are a lot of people who do work with you. You said that, draw from your colleague experiences. So my boss, who I directly report to, I've known her for a long time. So I knew her back when I was interning in the organization. And she's probably one of the most committed and dedicated people I know. Like she'll work, and she'll only leave the office when she is satisfied with what she has done, which is great. She's very attention to detail. She has a to-do list. If it's not done, she's not out of the office. That's great. But now what's happening is that there are things, everybody has issues at home. They can be minor or major. Now, in the past 6 months, one of our family members has been going through a health crisis of some sort. Now, and it's not COVID, it's a chronic illness. So now what I would expect from her would be like, okay, if next 6 months I'm going to be in and out because I'm solely responsible for this person's health, and you have to learn to manage. I'm going to train you. So if I'm working 4 out of 5 days a week, I'm going to train you, I'm going to brief you. You have these things to do, and you're going to report to my boss, because that's how it works. But now, because she's so involved and she's genuinely so passionate, she feels like she can't step out of work. Even when she stepped out, she actually hasn't clocked out. So while she's sitting with that family member, or she's sitting in the hospital, or wherever she is, she's sitting in a car to go to the hospital, she's constantly thinking about the work that has to be done. Now, everybody is talking about COVID, being at home, or working from home, stuck in one room, and mental health. And I'm not going to repeat myself, but of course, it's so important to clock out, and especially in this sector, because you are emotionally investing in the work that you do. And then on top of that, if you don't clock out, you are genuinely wearing your mind out. And that affects your productivity. It is difficult to cope with. Everybody has different coping mechanisms. And of course, you find like N number of articles on LinkedIn or everywhere, literally everywhere on the internet, that tell you how to cope with mental health, um, you know, how to make sure that your mental health is, in control. Like I literally read an article about how to make sure your mental health is in control. Like how do you do that? Anyways, how to make sure that, work from home isn't affecting your mental health negatively. All of this. And I think one important thing is to just clock out. And I think it applies also to a life outside of COVID, where the work hours are not as insane as they are right now. Like we know that people's work hours are longer because they're at home, so there's no issue of like commute time and people are always online. But it has to be the same way even if things are not this bad. Because your job is not your entire life. I mean, you have a lot of other things. Like for me, I think in the beginning, of course, I was overwhelmed with work. So I was working 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day. It was not healthy. I was working 9 to 10. I was working one day I worked 9 to 12, few days. And I realized that, yeah, it was a crisis. So it's fine if I work that long for, these many days. But then I'm seeing my colleagues work the same hours even today. And it's not a crisis anymore. You understand? Like, I think all the crisis, all of the programs that we had started, they've closed out. And now people are doing that because it's become a habit, because they've gotten used to the schedule. And you need to step out and you be like, you really don't have to be used to the schedule. Like, this is not healthy for you. And then you don't sleep enough. Prolonged hours in front of a screen mess up they give you headaches. And yeah, I mean, it's mostly just about clocking out. But yeah, I think for me, coping with mental health it's been up and down, it's been bumpy, but I think I figured it out eventually because it takes time. It really takes time. Inspiring. Oh my God, this is very, very difficult. Compassionate and fun. Yeah.